Colin asks, are you live? Aye, because he doesn't want to upset anyone, I think. It is Monday afternoon, 12:30. This is the Acsom Bulletin. I'm Paul John Dykes and I'm delighted. Today it's a new lineup. It's a new lineup on a Monday. Amy will be back. It will be a bumper Monday afternoon when Amy's back. But joining us on a Monday, as well as Colin Watt, who you are all familiar with, is young James Mackenzie. You've done a wee swift change from a Wednesday. Kevin Graham's analogies got all too much for you, mate, and you've come to join Colin, Amy and I on a Monday. How are you, James?
Yeah, I'm doing quite good. It'd be quite funny to blame Kevin for chasing me away, but uni restrictions come in and we move to Mondays.
You know that seems to be a kind of reoccurring theme.
Did you not used to be on a Wednesday, Colin?
Did, aye.
Oh my God!
And so did Brian, and then Kev's now on his own. I'd like to say that Kev is a very nice person. There's not anything at all to do with Kev at all. I mean, his pronunciations are a bit all over the place, but apart from that, he's a really nice guy.
There's nothing at all to do with Kev. And that was the last straw. I heard on time
you missed a whole season of Elanusi.
Elanusi. That's right. By the way, we've all been guilty here and there of mispronouncing words. I'm sure there is a whole litany that can be given to my name, so let me know what I don't say properly in the comments field. I'm sure there are far more important things for you to talk about, and we are keen to get you involved in the comments today because Celtic have fallen to their first league defeat in almost a year. The headline reads, Ange will ensure that Paisley defeat was no more than a blip. But what did he learn? What did we learn, Colin? We'll be asking that. We'll be looking through the entire team and seeing what worked, what didn't work. Not much worked, to be honest with you. Did the third kit work against the St Mirren jersey? Well, it seemed to work for St Mirren. It didn't confuse them any. But we will kick off by bringing in some of our regular contributors. Jungle Lions first in on the YouTube channel. Hopefully Ange does learn fast, 2 to 3 changes at most. We've seen it so often, Colin. We have seen in the past where there's a whole host of changes and it just doesn't flow. But on the flip side, we made a lot of changes against Ross County up at Dingwall, which is historically a difficult ground to go and get a result at. And it worked okay. So before the game, are you thinking to yourself there are too many changes getting made here? Or is that something you're looking at with hindsight? With the benefit of hindsight, Colin?
I genuinely did say to a couple of my pals when I seen the lineup, I says that's not the right team to play today. I knew from the word go that wasn't the right team to play. And it takes you back exactly a year today actually, when we went through to the Spaghetti ad when we were playing Livingston. And you look at the team that played that day, we started guys like James McCarthy, we had Volleyball and Golly's first ever appearance under Ange and last ever appearance under Ange with a Yeti up front. Turnbull and Rogic came into the team. Welsh came in as well to replace the injured Starfelt, I believe. So that was a lot of changes at that point as well. And I was looking at that team yesterday and I just thought we're making far too many changes. I always go with, if it's a successful team, don't change it too much. And we did. And I kind of had a wee feeling when I saw that team that we would maybe struggle. So, I mean, it's hard to say, but looking at it yesterday, you're looking at players that haven't really had a run of games, guys like Anthony Ralston, guys like Stephen Welsh, and then they're coming in against a team in St Mirren who had their best start to the season in a number of years. They've been playing some decent football, and they were coming up against some strikers who were on form as well. Yeah, okay, on the balance of play, looking at it, Celtic should have done a lot better, but it just kind of goes to show you can't just throw these guys in from the cold.
That's the difficulty, Colin. And by the way, that was another Nostradamus moment, Colin. The only thing is, though, you always come back and tell us what you were thinking after it's proven right. So I don't know how many of the Acsom bulletins we could go back on to actually find any of your predictions that came to fruition. It's always, I thought that or I said that. But fair play.
There was one I remember, we were in the studio covering the game live. Was it Kilmarnock away, maybe, or St Johnstone away? And just as Olivier and Cham came on, I said he's going to score the next goal. And he went on and scored the next goal. And everything in the comment sections, I should have put it on at bookies. But
Ollie and Cham. We're going into a game in Paisley, James, where we're up against a manager who certainly in Scotland has got a decent pedigree. I mean, he's done really well with clubs that don't have a massive budget, right? I mean, he made Motherwell quite a difficult side to play against, and you know that he would do the same at St Mirren. You know that he brings in physical players. I mean, I was just talking about this earlier on. You look at their front line. We've got a player in there in Jens that up until now, and it's not changed my mind, I've got to say, up until now I've been saying, this is another guy that we need to bring in permanently at the end of the campaign if we have that opportunity. We've got Welsh, who I think up until yesterday's game had done well when he played for Celtic this season, and they're up against a guy who's played most of his football in non-league English football, and Curtis Main, who's bounced about Scottish clubs and elsewhere. But Robinson has a knack of getting a tune out of that type of player. So what I'm probably thinking is, wholesale changes can work from time to time. But yesterday, the whole scenario, the whole makeup of that game and what we all knew we were going to face, do you think he got it wrong? I mean, Jungle Lion's saying, we've got a 2-week gap. So you can't use the rotation as a kind of reason for changing it, knowing that perhaps we had another game midweek against European opposition, which we don't. What was your take on it, James?
I think when I first saw the lineup, I could sort of understand why he'd rotate the team a bit, because it was a really hard fought and competitive game against Shakhtar Donetsk on Wednesday, where, I mean, some of the players looked knackered by the end of the shot specifically, and Cameron Carter-Vickers pulls up with an injury in training on Friday, which I don't know if the game on Wednesday contributed to that injury or whatever, but he's going to be out for a few weeks. So I sort of understood when Ange was looking at it, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. And after the game, sort of where we went wrong was the rotation in the team. We looked a bit slow and lethargic in the midfield with guys like Aaron Moy and David Turnbull in there. And I get the argument as, why would you rest players when we've got an international break coming up? But ultimately it was the rotation of the players. Too much rotation, which cost us on Sunday at the end.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of opinions coming in. Of course, it is all about that. It is just our opinion in relation to where it went wrong. We're not overreacting. There's no knee-jerk here, Colin. We're sitting, certainly me, I'm sitting with a brew and just looking back on a run of games that saw us almost go a year without defeat in the Scottish League. It was always going to come to an end. James and I were speaking before you popped in, before we went live, that you remember back to the brilliant Brendan Rodgers run that came to a halt at Tynecastle in pretty unstylish fashion, where we got absolutely hammered, 4-0 it was, and it had to come to an end, and it did come to an end. I don't see this being more than a blip though, Colin. It's not a run or a sequence of events or results. It's just a one-off, surely.
You would think so, and I think on reflection now you're looking at certain players, and as much as you call this a one-off game, a lot of players will be judged on that performance going forward. There'll be a lot of ones that will be a while before they get the chance to get that opportunity to play for Celtic from the start again. We may see guys like Maeda drop out the squad. We may see guys like Moy, as much as he has impressed when he's came on, maybe that is his role as that sort of 20-30 minute guy towards the end of the game who can dictate. We might not see him play from the start again. Stephen Welsh, we might not see him come in as soon as Carter-Vickers and Stafford are fit again. So I think there's lessons to be learned from that, and unfortunately when you come back to these games and you look back on them, there's always someone that you remember from playing in that game. Like I was just mentioning, Volleyball and Golly didn't exactly have the worst game at the Spaghetti had last year, but he's that one that you remember actually while he was actually in that team at that point. Whereas you'll see probably in the second half of the season, maybe guys like Haksabanovic, guys like Abiligard come in, and you'll think back to that team and say there was far too many changes, but now we've got the kind of squad quite where we want it to be. I'm looking forward to seeing the big Danish boy getting fit and actually playing in that role, because although he's been on the bench, I don't think he's anywhere near starting yet.
It would be good to see him for sure, and I don't think we've seen flashes of Haksabanovic. We've not seen the best of him. He's given us an indication of what he can do, but let's not forget we do have those two players that are going to come in and bolster what is generally a very strong starting 11. I'm going to get this one out of the way, James. The colour clash, I thought it was bizarre. And by the way, the third kit, initially when it came out, I think I was quite critical of it. Wasn't a big fan. You guys are sitting with away jerseys on now. And I think it's grown on me. I seen it on JP last week and I thought it looked pretty stylish. But it didn't seem like the best idea for both teams to be wearing black shorts. By the way, please don't think I'm using this as an excuse for our poor performance, because both teams had to play with that issue, if it was indeed an issue. It certainly was to a TV audience, I thought. I mean, it seemed a bit bizarre, James, that we would wear a kind of silvery grey against a black and white side with black shorts and all that. I was half expecting a Alex Ferguson style change of kits at half time. You may be too young to remember the game against Southampton, where he was complaining that the Man United grey kits were blending into the crowd and we couldn't pick out a pass and all this, was what Alex Ferguson said. It was a bit of a strange decision, was it not, to wear those jerseys? Would you not have been better wearing the one that Colin's got on the now, or St Mirren in their away strip, Celtic in the hoops?
Yeah, I was surprised that even the referee didn't sort of call out. First of all, it sort of ruins the viewing experience a bit for someone in the audience watching on the TV. And when the game's televised in the Sky, you'd think they'd want to make it the best sort of viewing experience possible. But it was really hard to tell the teams apart. When the ball's at the far side of the pitch, you can't really tell who's got the ball or what's going on. And it's the sort of game that, if those were the two kits in a game of FIFA, I would quit the game and start again.
I wish we could have done that at half time.
If I could have done that, I wish I could have done that as well. But we're not using this as an excuse. St Mirren had the same kit clash as we did and they won 2-0. So it sort of made the game a bit harder to watch than the 2-0 loss already was. But it's looking back, it's something maybe should have been done.
Yeah, I mean, we could have certainly come on today, Colin, and tried to blame the ref in a colour clash, but obviously that wasn't the reason for Celtic's poor performance.
No.
Now, James has already mentioned Cameron Carter-Vickers. I wanted to bring him up. We will talk about some of the partnerships that we've perhaps seen for the first time yesterday, and maybe for the last time as far as Colin's concerned. But Cameron Carter-Vickers, it really proves how important he is, Colin, but also how important the partnership's been between him and Starfelt. I mean, let's not overlook the fact Starfelt's had a couple of injuries now this season. There's Carter-Vickers going out injured. And you think you've got a really strong squad. I heard a lot of talk. I thought it was, to be fair, not ridiculous, but I thought it was a wee bit overblown. All this talk about Celtic having a second string that could win the league and all this kind of stuff. Seen a lot of that chat. I think that's been blown out the water yesterday. But Cameron Carter-Vickers is pivotal to the success of this side, as is his partnership with Starfelt. And we missed them massively yesterday, Colin.
Yeah, definitely. You could see it was a partnership that hadn't really played together with Welsh and Jens. And when you're coming up against kind of big bully boy strikers like Curtis Main, then you are going to see some people exposed in that sense. We've seen it time and time again, to be perfectly honest, when you're playing a partnership that's maybe not had the time to settle and they're coming up against guys like Main or Dykes or players like that. So for me, it's not a partnership I think we'll see going forward. It did show the kind of lack of games that they've had, and this is one of the things I was saying is why I would have tried to loan out Stephen Welsh in that window there, as much as we'd have needed him to play yesterday. It's not having that week after week performance that can help his development. We've seen it, probably not the best time to mention him considering he got sent off at the weekend, but we've seen the development of Liam Scales up at Aberdeen this year, how highly rated he is now by the Aberdeen players and the fans, and how much he is missed when he's not in that team. Guys like Adam Montgomery, who are at St Johnstone just now, who could have easily been part of that squad yesterday. But they're getting this sort of match fitness week after week after week, and it's helping their development. So when you kind of look at it again, if Stephen Welsh is kind of in here today, we're saying Cameron Carter-Vickers could be back in a couple of weeks, Starfelt could be back in a couple of weeks. He then drops out and sits on the bench, and then when we need him again, it's not as if he's playing reserve football or he's got B football so that he can get himself up to speed. He's just kind of been thrown in there. And it's a kind of, it's not a dig on him. I think he's a good player, but when players have not had that much sharpness and they come into the team, it can take them a while to get up to speed. And when they're coming up in a game like that yesterday, sometimes it shows. Other times, like against Ross County, you'll get away with it because we were so dominant on the ball up there. Yeah, we were dominant yesterday, but St Mirren caused us more problems than what Ross County did. And law of averages, as you say, you're eventually going to lose a game. But I think it was just the sort of the lack of urgency and the lack of creativity yesterday that probably frustrates most people.
There was a real lack of creativity. You're right, Colin. Carter Vickers gets injured. He joins on the treatment table his partner James and Carol Starfelt. 2 injuries throw us in a little bit of a dilemma because we really are quite, we're quite thin when it comes to the centre half positions now. Whether or not some of the players mentioned by Colin would have been able to step in, I think they probably would. This time last year, Scales and Montgomery were part of the squad. But it does show that we are quite thin at the back and in certain positions. A couple of injuries and you really are left wanting. We don't really have the 2 or 3 young guys coming through. Where are they? Where's the next, wave of talent like Stephen Welsh? I know that we've got rid of a lot of players, but it's almost as if there's a dearth of talent, so we can't even look at the next centre half.
No,
because we know Dane Murray's had game time, Colin, under difficult circumstances, then had a really bad injury. Boston Lawwell has performed pretty well in the 5th tier of Scottish football. And you wonder, in times like yesterday, to have somebody on the bench that you could bring in. We don't have that at the moment. Is that a concern, James?
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're looking to rotate Welsh and Jens, considering Carter Vickers and Starfelt are injured, you would probably be looking to playing Oliver Abildgaard at centre back ahead of some of these players in the B team, because Ange did mention in one of his interviews how he can play sort of in the defence. And the fact that we'd be looking to play a defensive midfielder at centre back instead of giving some of these younger players a chance, it's just a bit mad, to be honest. And I remember people saying we should have signed another centre back in the transfer window along with Jens. Personally, I'll admit, I thought it would have been overkill to sign another centre back, but we're now in the position where the 2 starting centre backs that helped lead us to the league title last season are both injured. So perhaps maybe another centre back should have been signed in the summer transfer window.
See, the thing is, Paul, when we're talking about the lack of players coming through, we've lost a sort of generation in that sense. You look at guys like Barry Hepburn and stuff like that made the moves out to Germany. If they were still in and around Celtic just now, they'd be about 19, 20, and they'd be the guys that you'd be expecting to sort of make that move up to the first team. And for the ones that made the move to Germany, the ones that went down south, guys like Vincent Angelini and stuff like that, you'd be sitting there going, right, this is the time where it's either make or break for you at Celtic. Are you going to be good enough to step in the way that Stephen Welsh was called in from the cold when he was out on loan at Morton?
Yeah.
Or are you going to be the one that just kind of hangs around the club and maybe goes on loan to like a Dundee or a Queen of the South, and then eventually when your contract's up we say thanks but no thanks? And the likes of what was the Irish striker that we had that we brought, he was out on
Jonathan
Afolabi and Ciaran McInroy, players like that. I know not a lot of players make it into the first team, but we are missing that generation now. You're still saying that guys like Boston Law and Rocco Vata and players of that ilk, they're maybe another season away before you can actually think they're going to have the experience behind them to step into that first team. The kind of team that we had there that you would consider maybe ready to go, your Scott Robertsons, your Owen Moffats, they're all gone.
Yeah.
There's no one there. We've lost that generation, and you can see why it was important for Ange to then turn to his B team and say, this isn't working. And as loyal as we've been to guys like Tommy McIntyre, you could say, well, you've not actually done your job right, because, yeah, okay, you might be doing well in the Lowland League, but your actual aim is to get me players that can come into my team.
Where's my 3 or 4 players to promote up to the first team? Yeah,
exactly.
You're right. Aye. No, you're spot on. And I think, Colin, what's going to be interesting in the coming it'll probably be a couple of years' time, will be to have a look at that dozen or so players that you're talking about, this lost generation, lost to Celtic at least, and how they develop elsewhere, because there is a whole host of talented players within that. I think I counted about a dozen. There was another one just the other week there, went down to Leeds, goalkeeper went down to Leeds, 16-year-old. By that age, you're making your first team debut for Arsenal, apparently.
Even players like Connor Hazard and Ross Doohan as well. How long we held on to them and we loaned them out and put them here, there and everywhere. Okay, Hazard's doing okay with HJK Helsinki, but even if he was ever to make a move back to Scotland, he just wouldn't get anywhere near that Celtic jersey.
No.
The one that blew my mind the most was Leo Hjelde. He left us for Leeds, I think it was last summer, where he was playing B-team football, and because of all the injuries at Leeds, he was playing Premier League football. I think he might have played 2 full 90 minutes for Leeds. And apparently we couldn't find any way to get him game time in the Scottish Premiership. We had him relegated to the B team.
Yeah, even when he was on loan at Ross County, he was rated so highly that, what was it, Hughes turned around and says he's the next
Van
Virgil
Dijk.
van Dijk. I mean, it's a bit of blowing up someone's backside to do that, but the fact that he is playing for Leeds in the Premiership, there should have been a way for him to be part of this Celtic first team squad.
I agree with that, and we will, I'm sure, on A Celtic State of Mind, have a look at that lost generation as they progress elsewhere. Now, there's a few links underneath this video, and I'm going to bring them up because over the weekend, not only were Celtic getting beat in Paisley, but our friends the Wakes were in the recording studio. Now, I've kind of kept this a wee bit under wraps, and I've drip fed a wee bit on the socials, etc. So I think it's maybe time just to put it out there exactly what it is we're doing here. So the Wakes, you'll be well aware of the Wakes. For many, many years, a kind of staple favourite of Celtic fans, of St Pauli fans. They touch on subjects that are close to our heart as well. And, I've become friendly with Paul Sheridan, the lead singer, through JP Mason, as it happens. And Paul now does a show every quarter on the channel around his love of the football jersey. So we got chatting about what we're going to do for the third year, Colin, of the Acsom Charity Weekender. And, last year it topped almost 29 grand for St Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic, who were struggling to put their lights on and their heating on, and the Celtic fans came together through that weekender to raise cash to keep them afloat. The year before that we raised around £26,000+ for 4 different charities around homelessness, food banks, mental health and underprivileged kids. So this year we were thinking, right, we'll definitely will do the charity weekender where we go live for 24 hours over a weekend. However, there needs to be something that we're pointing you towards, and that something this time is a charity single. So we're actually recording a charity single, and it's a single that has been already recorded by the Wakes. There's a real backstory to the song. Celtic fans are going to love it, and it's called The Glory and the Dream. So the Wakes have re-recorded it. We, over the last 2.5 years or so, have had loads of talented bands in at the State of Mind studio doing acoustic sessions, and it just so happens that some of those very talented and creative bands are Celtic fans. So they're going to get in on the act, and they're going to sing on the single as well. Please don't mention Band-Aid. It's not going to be cheesy. It's going to be loads of Celtic fans doing their thing. And that single is going to be released around our charity weekender. So we're going to ask Celtic fans to download it with a view to pushing it as far as we possibly can. Now, all I'm going to say is, what does it cost these days, James? You'll know, for a download of a single. It's under £1, right? About 69 or 89 pence.
69 pence, roughly.
Something like that, right. So you think about it. 2 years ago, we raised 27 grand. 26,000 downloads would push that single pretty far, as would 29,000 downloads.
9,000 downloads gets you into the top 40.
Well, there you go. Right, so this is where we're coming from. We're recording a promotional single, video rather, and we're going to be doing all that around the fundraiser for St Mary's. So it's out there. The cat's out the bag. We'll be sharing some footage of the recording process as we get people into the studio as well. I'm going to try and get Susan Boyle on it, as well as Paolo Nutini and all these guys. But I don't know. Every time I mention Subo, people smile. I mean, imagine having that voice on single. It'd be tremendous. So that's what we're doing.
You need to get Jeddle done as well, do you not?
I'd love. Yes, let's get Jedward in. Maybe now's the time to ask them to get on this single. And we're going to push it over Christmas, as I say, over the weekender. We'll see where that takes us. But something a wee bit different to take us away from the St Mirren debacle yesterday. And we're going to have to speak about St Mirren a wee bit more. We've been chatting about Cameron Carter-Vickers, his importance to the team, James. But it does highlight that, you know, that second tier, if you like, if you've got the first choice being Starfelt and Carter-Vickers, the second choice being, at the moment, Welsh and Jens, there's a massive drop, eh? I mean, what did you think of the partnership between the two?
It looked very, very shaky. I mean, the way they were dealing with the high balls into the box, it was just... You were just allowing them chances. Guys like Curtis Main were completely bullying the backline. Jens' performance on Sunday reminded me a lot of a Christopher Julian against Lyndon Dykes sort of performance, where Curtis Main just basically sort of ragdolled and bullied them. He bullied the both of them all around the park. But I think for some of the goals, I think it was the second one where it was Cal McGregor's header goes up in there. I think Joe Hart, he could have came out to get it pretty easily. But it's quite hard to just sort of look at this game and pick out sort of singular moments. I think when you look at the attack as well, I thought we weren't creative enough. We weren't really decisive enough. There was sort of multiple moments where Jota had the ball down whichever side of the wing he was on, and they would have 3 St Mirren defenders on him and not an option to pass it to. I mean, the best sort of attacking option we had for that entire game was Haksabanović's cameo in the second half. I mean, I thought he offered the most in attack, and considering he got, about 20 minutes in the park, I think that says a lot about the sort of attacking display against St Mirren as well.
Yeah, I think yesterday our friends from Celtic Down Under were speaking about this, and they said the only difference between being disappointed with a draw and being disappointed with a defeat is the fact that we're going to be criticising the forwards and the defence if we get beat, whereas it's normally the forwards that we look at if it's just a nothing each stalemate. Colin, we're talking about partnerships, and there's a couple of others I'm going to bring up, but Welsh and Gents for me, and I've been a big fan of both players on an individual basis. But I just think that if you take out Cameron Carter-Vickers from that equation, Welsh and Jens just could not handle St Mirren's front line yesterday, and that's a bit of concern because Curtis Main, I'm not being disrespectful to these guys, but we should be able to deal with those types of players. I mean, Main is a strong wee guy, but he's a wee guy, and you should be able to deal with him. I don't want my central defenders to be bullied, and I just don't think that partnership works, and I'd be very surprised, unless forced, to see that partnership start for Celtic again, Colin.
But again, that's what happened yesterday. It was forced. There was no one else there. And I know James kind of highlighted the fact that you've got like a Billigard who could potentially play centre half, but you don't want him to turn into the Danish near Beaton.
I thought you were going to say Doué. I thought you were going to say Doué there.
No, but you want these players to sort of play in their natural positions. Even yesterday, I think when we went to the back 3, it was kind of, well, who's playing where sort of thing. You'd Ralston move into centre half, and it was almost like, not to kind of compare it directly, but it was a bit like when we lost 4-0 there under Mowbray, and we were playing kind of players out of position, and we're just kind of hoping that with the enough attacking threat on the ball yesterday, we'd be able to create something and create a goal. But with the amount of players that we've got there, it just kind of shows you that if it comes down to having to play this again, you're probably going to have to change things up, because you're going to have to offer a bit of protection if the likes of Main is going to bully someone like Stephen Welsh or Jens. You're maybe going to have someone kind of sitting there on him and then concentrate on the rest of the play. Because even if you've got to sacrifice one of the midfielders to do so, there's still enough creative outlet out there so that when the ball gets up, we should be able to create something. Changing that whole middle of the park yesterday, that changed how we play football.
Yes.
When you look at it, when it happens during the game, you can absolutely predict when Celtic's playing well how the subs go. We make all 5 subs. We start on about the 64th minute, and we make 3 subs, and 3 of those subs are Turnbull, Moy, and whoever the other striker is that isn't playing, whether it be Kyogo or Giakoumakis, and you keep McGregor on the park, and you change the two in midfield, whether it be Hatate and O'Reilly or whoever's playing in there, and you change the striker. And then 10 minutes later, off will come McGregor and on will come the third midfielder, whether it be Moy or whether it be whoever else that was going to slot into that defensive midfield role. So we know how we do it when we're playing well, but when you change it round, especially when players have only got 15, 20 minutes to get up to speed, it's very difficult to change the emphasis on being such a sort of defensive-minded player to then pushing forward and giving everything without leaving gaps at the back as well. So
this is the thing, Colin. I made that point yesterday on Twitter, and a few people said, well, Jota was on the park, O'Reilly was on the park, attack. But when you're bringing these guys in where the pace has already been set, it's very, very difficult for that entire dynamic to be turned around just by making the substitutes. I mean, you're basically asking them to cancel out 60, 65 minutes of Celtic dominating play, but St Mirren frustrating us, and us being pretty uncreative to, score 3 goals in something like 30 minutes. And, it instantly looked as though that was not going to be that type of performance. So I totally agree with that.
I think the only way you could have done that is if you took the massive risk of changing all 5 players at half-time.
Didn't I say that in the group? Change the strips and swap 5 players and we might be all right.
It's a massive risk considering somebody might pick up an injury, but it's the only way you're going to change the tempo of that game yesterday.
You're also saying, Colin, if you're Ange Postecoglou, I got this wrong. If you're making that kind of level of change, you know.
He did say that at full time, though. He did admit that he got it wrong. And you'd rather a manager be bold enough and be brave enough to admit that he got it wrong and change it earlier than just put up with it and hope that it gets better.
How refreshing is that, Colin? A manager who actually takes it on the chin.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at a couple of weeks ago when Rangers played Hibs. Lee Johnson made the 2 subs after 27 minutes or something like that, and it didn't work right away for them. But he knew that he got his team selection wrong, and he changed it first. And yeah, okay, maybe it's not great on players that are coming off after 25 minutes, 27 minutes. But if you have got it wrong, you change it at your first opportunity. You don't just sort of persevere with it.
No, I'd agree with that. By the way, back on the subject of the wakes, Colin has suggested that Jedward should be on the single. If you've got any suggestions, by the way, Colin, I don't know if you've got them booked in for the Greenock yet, but if you've got any suggestion as to who should be on the Acsom and the Wakes Christmas single, that's what we're calling it, for the Acsom weekender, entitled The Glory and the Dream, then give us your suggestions. I want Susan Boyle on it. We've got, I think, 10 of the guys and girls who have been in at the studio who have agreed to come in and put their voice into the chorus. It's going to be great around about Christmas to release this. Any suggestions, James? Mogwai?
Yourself?
Oh, no, we wanted to sell singles.
Percussion. I can do a bit of percussion in the background, right?
I think you've got to look at someone like Jim Kerr. Simple
That would be good. Aye, that would be good. I bumped into him once in the Gorbals, Jim, and so he is aware of Acsom now because I spoke to him about us, and why not ask Craigie White? He's not going on the single.
What about your good pal Manny as well?
Watch this space. He might come in and play a bit of bass. Poor Kev. Yeah, Craig. You know what? Kev knows that we're just winding him up. He binned Kev. James and Colin have both binned Kev. I've no binned him. He's still on a Wednesday, and we're running out of contributors to put in on a Wednesday. But the best thing about last week was JP's impression of Kev, and by the way, he toned it down. He was impersonating Kev prior to us going live on Thursday, and JP, I do love an impression for JP. But the reason I mentioned the links underneath the video is because although we have a total as such for St Mary's last year, we've kept the fundraiser open. So if anybody ever wants to donate to that fundraiser, you do so in one of the links underneath this video, and when the payment comes in, we send it over directly to St Mary's bank account to help with the upkeep of the birthplace of Celtic. Now, Paul McLean comes in to say, what have we learned? The squad isn't as strong as we believe it to be. There was a lot of talk, James, about Celtic having almost 2 teams that could do the job in most games, and we could play a European side followed by... And I think that's been blown out the water. after yesterday's performance. Do you think everybody was getting a wee bit carried away with that?
Yeah, we were ranting and raving sort of at the end or just after the transfer window about how strong this squad is. The starting squad is very strong, but perhaps the sort of backup players aren't as good as we perhaps thought. You look at, we're saying, anybody could step into the team and do a job, but I think if you're playing guys like Aaron Moy and David Turnbull together, they're both not exactly the quickest of players. They like to sort of take their time with the game, and that just completely slowed us down. And then you see when we tried, as you mentioned there, we tried to bring on guys like Hatate in the second half, who they love controlling the game. They love to impose their sort of style and tempo in the game. They just couldn't do it because the game was already gone and slowed down because of the midfield that we had started in the first half. And again, I hate to sort of go back to the players we were talking about earlier, but I don't think Stephen Welsh is perhaps as good as we maybe thought he was. There's been quite a few games, big games, where he's been called upon and he's not sort of really done the job. Again, I don't know if, as Colin said, that's because I lack of game time, maybe I lack of sharpness, but when we were talking about players who should have got loaned out a few seasons ago, we were talking about the young players perhaps. He should have had another loan spell, maybe last season or the season before, where he wasn't going to get much game time. I think he could have used one last season.
It's interesting, though, that there was 2 reported approaches for Stephen Welsh, Colin, Toulouse and Udinese.
Yep.
Both wanted him. And, I still go back to the Chris Julian scenario really playing a part in our dealings in transfer market when it comes to centre-halves. I mean, last season, Cat Vickers comes in on loan last day of the transfer window because, it was up in air as to when Julian was coming back in. At that time, I think the suggestion was he was coming back September, October time. It didn't happen. He ended up playing, I think, 20 minutes against Wraith Rovers. Then this time round, we brought Yates in before Julian leaves. So has Welsh suffered from a wee bit of that as well, Colin, where we're thinking we need to keep a hold of him because we don't have enough centre-halves?
It is that kind of aspect, isn't it? I mean, the squad is a very strong squad. See, if you look at it, yes, on paper it's a very strong squad, but if a player was to go out injured, for example, say a Matt O'Reilly, and you're looking at someone like David Turnbull to come in, there is a reason why David Turnbull's not the first choice player and Matt O'Reilly is, and you notice that. But if you only make that one change, and it's O'Reilly out and Turnbull in, you tend to get by with it because they'll offer something a bit different to the team with the rest of the players playing at the top of their game. Then someone like Turnbull will actually up his game and you'll maybe see a couple of assists, you'll maybe see a couple of goals, and you'll notice there's a slight change, but you'll not notice that there's that sort of massive drop-off that we saw yesterday. So when you kind of take a look at it, bringing 6 of those players in that haven't played week in and week out, that's when you notice the difference. It'd be okay, see if you gave those 6 another run of 5 or 6 games, there's every chance that they could get up to the level that we've seen the performances from the rest of the squad this season. But when you're throwing them in from the cold, it will maybe take them a game or 2 to get up there. I mean, how many times did we kind of see guys like Giacomakis getting written off last year? Someone that hadn't had a full pre-season, someone that came in out the cold, was playing 15 minutes here or there, and then when he played his first 90 minutes, he missed a penalty. And that was it. He was kind of written off, and then he came back, and when he actually got a run of games and Kyogo got injured, he showed how good he actually could be. So as much as there's players that will say yesterday they had a poor performance, if they had to play again on Wednesday night, for example, you'd probably see a totally different performance because they've had that 90 minutes in their legs, or they've had that 75 minutes in their legs, and they're getting more match sharpness. That's part of the problem. They can train as well as they want to train for Ange, but there's so much of a difference playing in a training game as opposed to playing in an actual match, and you're coming up against players from the opposition. In training, you're not going to get those sort of niggly people biting at your ankles and trying to kind of hurt you, whereas when you go on and you're actually playing in there, if that's the kind of team you're coming up against and you're a stylish player like a Hatate or an O'Reilly, it's going to take you a bit of time to get up to speed to that game. That's how it didn't change when we brought them on in the sort of spells that we did, bringing the 2-2 and the 1-on.
Yeah, you certainly need games. I think there's an intensity you can train at, which probably is still, I'm not going to say a level, but there'll be a margin, there'll be a percentage below match intensity, James. So I totally get that. And I think we've seen it last season with some players who weren't getting the games, and when they came in, you could see that they were a bit ring rusty. Strangelove the Doctor, yeah, we are still top of the league. The reason I bring that one up is, again, people are talking about the fact that we beat Rangers and that 3 points now is what separates the two sides. I don't see it as cancelling out the beating of Rangers, James. I mean, yesterday was a one-off. If you beat an opposition and you put them to the sword as we did when we came up against Rangers, then there's the whole psychological aspect of that goes along with it as well, James. So I'm not looking at it like that. I'm just seeing it as like the Livingston 2-0 game, you'll remember under Neil Lennon, like the Hearts 4-0 game, which came pretty early in the season, if I remember right, before the turn of the year. These things happen, and they often happen away from home. And you know what? It gives you an opportunity to almost refresh, learn a few things about a few players, a few partnerships that might not work. And I'm pretty sure that by the time we come back to competitive action, I think it'll be Motherwell, is it the 2nd of October on a Saturday? We'll see the Celtic that we've grown to love under Ange Postecoglou. So I'm not looking at it any more than that, James. I'm not overreacting. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, we're still 2 points clear at the top of the table. Of course, it's frustrating because having a 5-point gap at this point in the season would have been sort of massive. But to have that sort of taken away straight away after we built the gap is a bit annoying. But there's so much of the season to go. It's hard to really sort of look at things this way. It's a blip, as the title says. Every sort of big team, when a big sort of win and run ends, it's usually a sort of blaze of glory that goes out. As we mentioned, Rodgers lost 4-0 when Liverpool went on their long unbeaten run. They were looking for an invincible season, I believe. Watford battered them 3-0, and then Watford got relegated that season. These sort of things happen. You can't win every game forever. If we could win every game forever, that would be absolutely fantastic. But that's just not the way football works, and these things happen.
Yeah, definitely. Now, there are some suggestions coming in, Colin, about people we should get into the recording studio. This is like, if you were to write down on paper that your greatest ambition to release a single, bring in loads of Celtic supporting musicians and make loads of money for charity, that would be right up there on the bucket list, Colin. And that's exactly what we're doing. I'm going to give you a wee bit more detail about the song as well. But here are some suggestions. Studs Lanigan thinks Shabin should be on the single. And Barry Rylan, was he a singer? Is that how he became famous?
Yeah, he was on X Factor.
Is that it? I often wondered, right? Because he just bounces about with the big teeth.
He was famous for being absolutely terrible.
Was he bad? There's a surprise.
Voting for him because he was that bad.
Well, this song is not bad, let me tell you. It will not be a sympathy vote when you download this tune. Yeah, Michael89, we do have contact with Bobby, and we will ask the question. They can only say no. The other thing I would say is that basically what happened back in 1987, were you two guys born? First of all, no. Oh my goodness, this song's older than used to. Oh man, this song is older than the Perriers. So basically what happened is that two individuals wrote a song called The Glory and the Dream, and the song was written by JJ or Jinky Gilmer, who is best known as being the frontman of the Silencers, and Gary John Kane, who's the bass player, the current bass player with the Proclaimers. So they two wrote a song back in 1987, and they wrote the song because Celtic wanted to release a centenary single in and around the centenary celebrations, where we had floral tributes and museum exhibitions and all that kind of thing, and of course Celtic won a double, but we're going to release a centenary single. So the two guys wrote the song, demoed it with members of the Bluebells and Trisha Ferns and members of Hue and Cry and all this kind of thing. They all got together and recorded a demo of this song, which I've got, but Celtic changed their mind. They didn't want to release the song after all. They eventually released the Celtic Rap, which if you go into YouTube you can see that they made the wrong decision in releasing the Celtic Rap. And the song, which is obviously Gary John's and JJ's, existed in its demo format since 1987 until those two gentlemen very generously said to Acsom that we could release it as a single. So that's the background to the song. The Glory and the Dream is the title of the song, and the Wakes have just re-recorded it. And I've got to say, I'm very excited about sharing this a wee bit more with everybody who tunes into Acsom. Steve-O, Matt, lesson learned, squad depth exists, but not for wholesale change. We're still dependent on the same 11 to get the ball rolling and set up the tempo. Absolutely agree with this. Sub-quality we have, bar one or two, are to see out games. It's all about that tempo that we set, and a big part of that is in the midfield, the engine room. So, Colin, you've got McGregor flanked by Hatate and O'Reilly, and that three has become undoubtedly the strongest midfield that we could possibly field. And they do set the tempo, don't they? And without Hatate and O'Reilly, McGregor isn't the same player either. It's a wee bit concerning, though, that when you look at the midfields that we have to play with, so you've got Moy there, who came in yesterday, you've got Turnbull as well. We allowed Beaton and Rogic to leave the club, but you've got Ideguchi, who's been kind of long-term injured. You've got McCarthy. And again, the drop in quality is huge. If you want them to go out and set that tempo of the game, almost put the game to bed before you swap it around. Is that a concern? We've spoken about the defensive concerns. Is that a concern for you, Colin?
But it is to an extent. I think you're still getting a lot of these players up to speed. I mean, Aaron Moy, as fit as he is, hadn't really played a lot of football. I mean, we heard this, don't worry about it, he's played 125 minutes for Australia and stuff like that, and fair enough, but we're now playing 2-3 games a week, and we are needing to give these guys 20-30 minutes at a time to get them in so that we can rest these players that are so pivotal to us just now, that are able to dictate the pace. But what you also need on the bench is players that can come on and change the game. You need players that if you are having a performance like yesterday and you're thinking, right, this isn't working for us, we've got to change this up here, who do you bring on? Now, if you go with what your starting three is at the minute, you would say it's Hatate, O'Reilly and McGregor. Now, if you were to turn to the bench, you're saying, right, if that three doesn't work, who do you bring on? Now, we saw yesterday that if you change the three that we've got and you go with Moy and you go with Turnbull and you go with whoever, they're not quite up to speed. And I think it does come from the fact of what the contributor was just saying there, is when we bring these guys on, the games are already won. So you are sort of seeing out the game. The only game so far this season where and the game was won, but we did go on once these players came on to go and score another couple of goals, was Dundee United away. Normally after 60-70 minutes we're kind of maybe 3-4 up and we're saying, right, let's see this game out. Against Dundee United, obviously we went on and scored another couple when these players came on as well. But you don't get that happening very often. So as I said to you earlier on, this is potentially what Moy's role is in this team, is that if you're looking to see a game out and you're looking to rest the players, you bring them on with 20-30 minutes to go. He might not be ever be the player that will start and play 2-3 games a week, as much as certain people who have watched Moy throughout his career would say he would be able to do so. But in this Celtic team, it might not just be his position. I mean, there's no harm in having a player like that. We've asked for players like that in the past, where if you're dropping someone off and you want to just see a game out, you want that experience in there. So if Moy can be that player, then that's fine. I mean, every big team had the super sub that they could turn to. You look at guys like Solskjaer, who was under Sir Alex Ferguson. It was always the likes of like Damien Duff when it came to Jose Mourinho's Chelsea. Or if you go back to Neil Lennon's Celtic, it was always Johnny Hayes. Johnny Hayes must have been on a appearance bonus with Neil Lennon because he was always the first sub if you go back and look at it. There's nothing wrong with having these players in the team because it's part of having a bigger, more reliable squad. It just, you notice the difference when these guys have to come in and start the 90 minutes.
Yeah, I just think I agree with quite a lot of the comments coming in. It was the wholesale nature of it. If you brought in Turnbull, for example, I don't think it would have been as noticeable.
No.
If you brought in Moy, on his own, I don't think it would have been as noticeable if he was maybe playing a defensive role and allowing the likes of O'Reilly, etc., to flourish. I've been impressed with Moyes' cameo appearances, James. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon and say that he's rubbish and he was a poor signing. I don't think he has been a poor signing. I just don't think yesterday was a great day for anyone in a Celtic jersey, but it was probably the game that I actually thought you could have thrown Moy in, because it's a familiar territory for him, and I was disappointed with his performance, because I've kind of been bigging him up, and I thought against even Donetsk, when he comes in, there's a couple of balls that he plays that I thought were superb. So I'm not quite ready to write these guys off, James. I just think that, as Colin says, there's a role for them, and that role isn't probably as a starter at this stage. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. We saw, is this the first game Aaron Moyes started?
He played the cup game, didn't he?
The cup game, man.
Ross County.
Yeah.
But in this game, on this occasion, the game was just a lot slower. And when he came on off the bench, most have been impressed with him. I've been fully impressed with him whenever he's made a cameo. I thought he's sort of calmed the game down when it needed to be calmed down, and just helped us see out. And teams like us need those sort of players when we're playing in a league like this. But I think Cal McGregor should have been the sixth from the start, as I've seen some people in the comments saying how important he is to us progressing the play, especially when we've got people in defence like Welsh and Jens, who are, in my opinion, very good at passing out from the back. I think that's one of the reasons I don't mind Steve Welsh that much. I think he's very good at passing out from the back. But even just having McGregor there to help them, when you've got a guy like Curtis Main putting all the pressure on them, I feel like it could have paid dividends for us. But again, hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, definitely. And, on a Monday after a defeat, it's not happened that often on Acsom since Ange has come in. We have got to pick the bones of that defeat. We have got to look at reasons why it happened and who didn't play so well. So I just don't think that we're sitting here criticising them for the sake of it. We just don't want to see many days like that. There is a suggestion of the afternoon from Lubo Maestro. Snoop Dogg. Could we get Snoop to rap on it? Why not? That rack.
Still come Welsh.
He's clearly got a fee, doesn't he?
Pay the fee, and we'll get Snoop Dogg on it. We might have to do a separate fundraiser to raise the fee. Lanky67, welcome back. You're sporting the same jersey as Colin. I'm listening to the Wakes right now. The best song, in my opinion, is Pirates of the League. They are. They've got a fan base over in St. Pauli as well. Sorry, Colin.
That's quite impressive, Paul. He's able to listen to the Wakes whilst having us on mute because he knows we're talking crap.
No, I mean, listen, this could be soundtracked by the Wakes. I can't wait actually to release the promo video. We really are going to push this as far as we possibly can. The Acsom listeners have got behind our previous two campaigns to raise cash around about Christmas time for those in need, and I know that will happen again this year, but we'll try and divert them into downloading that single.
I'd say it'd be really, really impressive if we managed to get into the top 40, the UK top 40, especially towards Christmas time. I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and it was these kind of pranksters, and they created a fake song, and they sort of went round, and basically what they needed was something like 9,000 downloads to get it into the top 40. And what they did is they asked people on the street to download the single, and then they'd give them their money back. So they sort of paid their way into the top 40.
Did they get in?
They got into number 27.
What?
So this is possible. With the amount of people that watch this show, with the amount of people that contribute, you can download it on so many different devices. Your phone, your tablet, your laptop. 59 pence roughly.
Can we get this into the top 40? Can we do it?
I don't think it's impossible. If you get the right people behind that, we could get an Acsom top 40 for Christmas.
And I'm definitely playing percussion. I mean, where do you go now if you get into the charts? Used to be on Top of the Pops, so that doesn't happen now. You know what I mean? There's no other alternative, is there?
No, there's nothing. No.
Not even a Saturday morning TV show.
No, but I think
we might go on Soccer AM. We could do that.
We could, but I tell you what, because these people were so unheard of, they ended up on the chart show itself to try and find out a bit about them. So you imagine having the Wakes on the big top 40 talking about this single. The publicity would be unreal.
We'd need to get Kev Graham involved because he's been taking a slagging today, and we'd maybe get him to do the Snoop Dogg rap. If Snoop can't do it, we'll get Kev to do it, right? Paul Cockwell, what's the song? The song is called The Glory in a Dream, Paul. It was an unreleased composition by Gary John Kane and JJ Gilmer, and the demo's brilliant. I've been listening to the demo for a couple of years, and we've re-recorded it, so we will have snippets on the socials. As soon as they're fed in, we'll be doing the promo video as well in the studio, and also down at St Mary's we'll be doing a bit of filming down there as well. So really looking forward to this one, just to keep things a wee bit fresh. Get John Barnes to do the rap. That's a great shout, Paddy. You imagine getting John Barnes to do the rap, because obviously World in Motion and the Anfield rap were the two occasions that John Barnes was in the charts, Paddy. Why not get him a treble and get him onto the Acsom as well? Tony,
if you're going to do that, you've got to bring in Kevin Keegan as well.
Oh dear. Kev Keegan. You know, the thing with Keegan is, I think he's always been pretty respectful with Celtic, but I'm not sure what he's up to these days.
What was it, the big Perman stuff? What was his song? Was it the top 20 he made?
Did he not do it, though, with somebody else? No, I'm thinking of Hoddle and Waddle. They did a duet.
Yeah, Hoddle and Waddle did the duet. I'm pretty sure Kevin Keegan had like a top 20 single.
Dear me. Things have changed, right? So back in the day, I think you had to sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, to get in the charts. Colin tells me, I think the target's going to be 10,000. If we can get 10,000 downloads, we might really ruffle people's feathers, and that's brilliant, because then you get the exposure and you're raising more and more cash for the charity as well. I think when we went down to St Mary's, it would have been probably about this time actually last year, and it was freezing. It was so cold, they couldn't put the radiators on. And you could see the cold air coming out your breath. It was just quite sad to see that during the pandemic they had really fallen into that state, as had a lot of similar businesses in and around that time, as well as chapels, because obviously it's not a business, it's somewhere that is the heartbeat of a community, and it's so relevant to the story of Celtic. Anyone who's into the history will know how important St Mary's is, and it's been so important as well, Colin, around the services for some of our dearly departed ex-players as well, most recently John Hughes down at St Mary's, and if you go down there, it's just a beautiful building. You know, you've got the mosaic as you walk in with the Celtic cross, you've got the angels above you at the entrance, the Walfrid painting is in there, the Peterhausen painting, and of course when you come out, Angorta Moor has that beautiful monument in memory of those who lost their lives during the Great Hunger in the 1840s. So it's a great place to visit, and you should visit it as often as you possibly can. If you're ever over on a pilgrimage from further afield, then make sure that not only Celtic Park, go and visit St Mary's as well. It's a huge part of our traditions and our history, and hopefully we can raise some extra cash for them as well. Colin, what is suggesting that we should get someone like Kevin Keegan to join John Barnes on the rap? I would much prefer to have Kevin Graham, never mind Kevin Keegan. Paolo Nutini, yeah, we can only ask the question. Shane McGowan, I would love that. I don't think Shane's in great health at the moment. Diamond Lights, was that Hoddle and Waddle?
I think that was Diamond Lights. I think Head Over Heels was someone says in the chat.
Kevin Keegan had a hit song,
but I preferred this one here from Kevin Byrne.
You could put that on a loop over some beats, I'm pretty sure, as well. That was when English football was at its absolute peak, in my opinion, in the early 90s. Someone will come in and tell me it was better in the 60s, but I wasn't around at that point. But
you think back to the music charts back then, but it was always like teams that made the FA Cup final, they always had the big sort of single, and then you had Snooker Loopy as well, when Snooker was at its prime.
I'm sure I had that single.
Did you?
I'm sure I did. My brother had the Anfield rap on 7-inch. Still got it. Jerry Cinnamon. Yeah, Jerry Cinnamon would be great, but he's impossible to get anywhere near. He's quite a private guy. He doesn't do much in terms of press and all that kind of stuff. Listen, keep the suggestions coming in. You can only ask, right? You can only ask. And
Lewis Capaldi, he's another Celtic fan.
Oh, yeah, I'd love big Capaldi to get in on the action.
Have you seen the video that he brought out for his new single?
How could I fail to see it, Colin?
That was fantastic.
I can't unsee it.
Absolutely fantastic.
When we were up at the venue the other week there was big, massive banners of him sitting with the top off and all that. I just thought, I love this guy. I absolutely love it. In this day and age where everything's about airbrushing and selfies and filters and all this nonsense, he just sits there and natural.
He did a podcast with one of the new boys that's on Dragon's Den. I can't remember the name of the boy, but it's really good. It goes in depth. He talks about his struggles with mental health and stuff like that. But there's always one question that gets asked, and it's, if you could do one thing, what would you do? And he says, I've always been rubbish at football, but I'd love to score the winner in the Glasgow Derby against them. That's how he finishes the podcast.
Oh, Lewis, on you come. Get involved, my man. Damien Marley, Daniel Mack comes in. Yes, obviously, there was that tweet that got a bit traction back in the day. I'm sitting watching the Bob Marley documentary, and I remember Dixie Dean saying in his book that Bob Marley was a big Celtic fan. He bumped into him when he was playing in Australia. And it was Rohan Marley. There was a picture of him wearing a Celtic jersey on the documentary, and people were saying, Paul, you're talking nonsense, blah blah blah. And then Rohan Marley gets in on the Twitter exchange and confirms, me and my dad were big Celtic fans. And of course Damien Marley's on Twitter as well. I'd love to hear the whole lot of them. The Fratellis. Yeah, we've got one of their gold discs out there, by the way, and the person who won it, Tony Cassidy, is a regular contributor to the comments field. He needs to pick it up, or I need to drop it off for him. But yeah, no Gallagher. I think there's more chance that Liam would do it. Capaldi, Kyle Faulkner, we could get them all in, couldn't we? That'd be brilliant. Yes, I'd love that. Just before we go, lads, one final point. Colin Watt mentioned earlier on about Giakoumakis. Was yesterday not tailor-made for a Giakoumakis start? I mean, I'm not just saying that because I thought Kyogo was pretty anonymous yesterday, James. But that type of game's a Giakoumakis game, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the way St Mirren's set up. It completely nullified Kyogo. I'm a big Kyogo fan. I think he's one of, if not the best player in the country on his day. But that sort of game, when they've been as physical as they are, the way our Robinson team plays, as he said, that's the sort of game you play Giakoumakis. And considering how much we rotate the team, why not give one of our best sort of rotation players, if you want to call him that, Giakoumakis, a run out in a game like that?
What do you think, Colin? I mean, I'm with James on this one. I'd have started Giakoumakis, and again, not with hindsight because I love wee Kyogo. I just think he was suited to that game yesterday.
He is, and I've always said that when you're coming up against guys like Declan Gallagher at centre half, that is the kind of game where Giakoumakis thrives. He loves getting in those sort of physical tussles, and I think if you'd sort of softened them up by playing him up front, then bringing Kyogo off the bench would have been a good option yesterday. When they went to the two, obviously I think Giakoumakis probably should have scored yesterday. He's had a couple of those recently where you're thinking he should have stuck that one in the back of the net, maybe like the one against Shakhtar as well. So I think he's someone who could be doing with trying to get a run of games just to get a wee bit of form and get a couple of goals in. Kyogo, obviously, even when he's not on form, he can turn around and score from 15, 20 yards quite easily like he did against Dundee United. But that would have been the sort of ideal game, I think, for Giakoumakis on Sunday. But as we say, this is hindsight, isn't it? We'll look back on it. We'll look back on this result at the end of the season, and it'll be the blip. It'll be the turning point like it was last year, where we hopefully go on and go unbeaten between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, let's hope so. A few other shouts before we go. Fran Healy, yes. Fran Healy's, I think it was the 4th Travis album, Celtic fans appeared on it. He recorded us chanting at a game against Fulham in a pre-season game, and he recorded our chants and they appeared on the album. So Fran Healy, who's sporting a fantastic beard at the moment. Dylan John Thomas, marquee. We spoke to Dylan John down at Meadowlands in Nottingham when we were down there filming. Great lad, really good chat. And there's a lot of people who don't like to obviously stick their colours to the mast and all that, and I get that, but Damien Dempsey, then you're talking, yeah, it would be great. I think he's playing in Dublin in December. But
Charlene Spiteri, not a Celtic fan as well?
Yes, Charlene Spiteri, how good would that be? So Acsom Live, again, we are going live. We're going to be in Gracie's in January the 20th. We're going to be in Gracie's in Glasgow, live event, special guest. Tickets are selling out, believe it or not, and we haven't even announced who the special guest is going to be. So if you want to come along, and get involved in something that's a wee bit different. It's not going to be just a Q&A. It's going to be a little bit different. That's all I'm saying at the moment. Come along. The ticket link is underneath this video. I know we got pumped from St Mirren yesterday, but don't stop that from buying tickets for Acsom Live in January, because by that time I'm pretty sure we'll still be top of the league as well. So please come along, say hello to the Acsom team who will be there on the night, and enjoy a night shoulder to shoulder with a lot of these people who are in the comments section who you've maybe never met before. By that time, we're probably celebrating a top 40 single as well, Colin. So why not come along and get involved? Thanks everybody for getting involved. Yeah, pretty disappointing today on account of a defeat yesterday. However, I'm pretty sure that Ange will put it right. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30 with the usual squad, Natasha, Lawrence and Declan. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you to James and Colin for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.